right, so let's begin to break it down for you. Let's talk about what we started on yesterday, tryptophan, getting to serotonin. Serotonin, a major common denominator in anxiety, in depression, insomnia, gut motility, meaning things like irritable bowel syndrome, constipation, things like that, anger, aggression, paranoia, things like that. We want to make sure we understand the physiology at play. Now, before we go into what can go wrong with the process, let's just go into how it is intended to flow, the conversion pathway intended to flow, and where we can get some of the drivers for it. So let's go ahead and just throw it up there for you so you can consume at your own pace. So we have tryptophan. Tryptophan, and there are some of the best sources of tryptophan, the most rich sources of tryptophan. Let me move this puppy up for you so you can see a little bit better. Tryptophan. We see a lot of these sources are actually from animal sources, which this is not any type of indictment of the vegan or vegetarian community. We work a lot of times with people who choose to practice these dietary practices, and we can see improvements, no doubt. And you can hedge your bet against some of this stuff too, but you want to just, from a trying to remain completely objective, non-biased, non-emotional position, it's clear to see how deficits in tryptophan, and thus the building block to get us to serotonin and melatonin, could be lacking depending on our dietary choices. So here are some of the dietary choices that gives us rich supply of tryptophan in the body. Now remember, the gut needs to be intact for this. So number one, we got to provide the substrate with foods like this that are rich in tryptophan. Number two, we got to make sure the gut, the machinery, is intact and working. That means digestive enzymes and also a non-compromised intestinal barrier, no leaky gut, so we can digest that stuff and get it in and do what we got to do with it. You can see tryptophan as we move on. Another source that is so can be potentially lacking in a vegan or vegetarian diet, iron. So we need adequate amounts of iron to get us to 5-HTP, which is a supplemental spot for a lot of people. A lot of people will throw that in there if they notice their diet is lacking or they need a bump in tryptophan for whatever reason. Once we get to that 5-HTP, you can see certain things. B12, now that's the methylated version of B12, methylcobalamin, along with B6, activated B6, hence the P5P in parentheses. That's pyridoxal 5-phosphate. Magnesium for so much, and oxygen. Oxygen, another key player. Now there's a couple other players that are involved in this 5-HTP to serotonin conversion, but these are four of the main players involved. Something to think about too today is the oxygen factor. Now again, this is not a debate about to mask or not to mask, but just be aware that if you're wearing a mask uninterrupted for hours upon end, almost how we're asking some of our kids in schools to do, that can create hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, a buildup of carbon dioxide, but also hypoxia, less oxygen. It's just a fact. It can just happen depending on the mask and how serious that mask is, how effective that mask is in keeping things out like oxygen and keeping things in like carbon dioxide. So something to be aware of. If you notice an increase potentially when you are wearing your mask for long periods of time of your anxiety, of your depression, disruption in sleep, things like that, it could be somewhat inhibiting this pathway of getting your 5-HTP to serotonin. So again, not a debate on masks at all, just being aware of what's going on and trying to do what we can to prevent it and mitigate some of the deleterious effects. Serotonin then, of course, we know that moves on to melatonin. So serotonin is the precursor to melatonin. Melatonin getting us that sleep, that rest, restoration, and repair when we go to bed at night. And we see light nutrition right there. That's highly dependent based on the light environment that we expose ourselves to. We've gone over this a lot in the past, but we just want to make sure we know if we're shunting this pathway at all, whether it's from tryptophan down, and that's what we'll go to in the next couple days, and we're not able to get to that 5-HTP, and we're not able to get to that serotonin, all of a sudden you can start to see other things like increased anger and aggressiveness, depression, amplifications in OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, increase in migraine, irritable bowel syndrome, tinnitus. So we're talking about ringing in the ear, fibromyalgia, bipolar disorders, anxiety disorders, things like that. Those are the types of things we start to see a lot of the times correlated with low serotonin levels. So these are things to be aware of. Number one, we want to get the diet right, get some things that are rich in those. If not, maybe supplement with some tryptophan. Take it a step further, Maybe supplement with some 5-HTP, but we still got to get that 5-HTP to serotonin. So you're still going to need adequate amounts of B12. You're going to need adequate amounts of folic acid. You're going to need adequate amounts of B6, magnesium. You got to breathe that oxygen. So this is what it should look like. Next we'll go into how this pathway can be disruptive and things could go wrong.